Okay, let's dive right in. A really powerful argumentative essay, it doesn't just start with the author's opinion. Nope. It starts when they lay out the problem with total clarity and then build the reasons that are going to support their entire case. So in this explainer, we're going to break down chapter 2 of the shape of the essay. We're moving past the intro and getting into the real meat of it, the rational development, the explanation, and the argumentative proofs that give an essay its backbone. And this, right here, this is the heart of the entire chapter. Before you can even think about defending a thesis, you've got to show the reader plain as day what the issue is, why it even matters, and what specific problem you're tackling. It's all about laying down a clean, clear foundation before you start building your argument on top of it. So, picture this. The source material wants you to think of your reader as a kind of judge. And you, the writer, you're trying to convince them about what's right or wrong, what's a good idea or a bad one. So what's the best tool you've got to win them over? It's not fancy vocabulary or super complex sentences. It's just explanation. You have to lay out the facts of the case so they can see their true value, their real scope, and the problem they actually represent. All right, so you've explained the situation clearly. What's next? Well, now you've got to prove your case. And this is where we get into the theory of proofs, using a framework that, believe it or not, goes all the way back to Aristotle. This is where an argument gets its muscle. Now, this is a really cool distinction the source makes. It basically splits all proofs into two big categories. On one side, you have non-artistic proofs. These are the things the writer finds out in the world, like a detective. On the other side, you've got artistic proofs, which the writer actually constructs inside the essay itself, like an architect. One's about discovery, the other is about invention. So what are these non-artistic proofs you go out and find? Well, they're external, pre-existing things. We're talking about stuff like statistical data, official figures, eyewitness testimonies, legal documents, news reports, even photos and graphs. These aren't things you create with your writing skills. They're pieces of reality that you bring into your essay to back up your claims. Okay, so if that first category of proofs is all about finding evidence, this next one is all about inventing it. Now we're looking at the artistic proofs, the ones the author skillfully builds right into their writing. And they're divided into those three classic appeals you've probably heard of before: ethos, pathos, and logos. First up is ethos. These are the ethical proofs, and they're all about establishing your credibility as an author. It's not just bragging. It's about showing the reader why you're the person they should be listening to on this topic. The book gives a perfect example. A professor writing about education who speaks from their years of direct, hands-on experience in a public school. The authority comes from that real, lived-in position. Next, we've got pathos, these psychological or emotional proofs. The whole goal here is to guide the reader into a frame of mind where they're more open to your argument. And look, this isn't about cheap tricks. The source uses a powerful image of a young person who has to drop out of school to help support their family. The point isn't just to make the reader sad, it's to get them to feel the human weight of the issue you're about to discuss. And that brings us to the brain of the operation, logos, or the logical proofs. After you've built your credibility with ethos and made that emotional connection with pathos, you have to deliver the goods, the actual reasoning. This section is all about the three major tools you can use to do exactly that. The source breaks down these logical proofs into three main forms: the example, the maxim, and the enthymeme. You can think of these as three different tools in your toolkit for explaining, comparing, and reasoning your way through an argument. Let's take a look at each one. The example is just a fantastic all-purpose tool. You can use it to compare things, to make a complicated point easier to understand, or just to illustrate what you mean. A real historical example has the weight of fact behind it. A made-up one can offer amazing clarity. And if you use a whole bunch of examples in a row, you can build this powerful, almost overwhelming case. Then you've got the maxim. Think of it as a little piece of concentrated wisdom that acts like a general rule for your specific argument. You know these. They're phrases like history repeats itself or power corrupts. They work so well because they tap into a belief that your reader probably already agrees with. And finally, we get to the enthymeme. Now this one is really cool. The source calls it a defective syllogism, which sounds bad, but it's actually a super clever line of reasoning that leaves one part unsaid. Why would you do that? Because you're relying on a belief or an idea that you already share with your reader. It's like an inside joke with your audience, and it's incredibly powerful because it builds on common ground. And this is where you see just how deep this source material goes. It doesn't just tell you what an enthymeme is, It gives you a whole playbook of different types. You can build one from opposites, from a definition, from cause and effect, by weighing pros and cons. You get the idea. It gives a writer a concrete set of moves for building really sharp, effective arguments. You know, one of the best things about this source is that it doesn't just leave you with a bunch of abstract theory. Right after it presents all these proofs, it immediately pivots to actually using them. It lays out exercises for identifying them, analyzing them, and then eventually writing with them. The thinking is crystal clear. First understand the tool, then see how it works, and finally learn to use it yourself. And this, right here, is the whole point. The goal isn't just to memorize a bunch of labels like ethos or enthymeme. It's to train yourself to see what kind of reasoning is happening in a text, and more importantly, to consciously use that same reasoning in your own writing. Suddenly, explaining and proving your point becomes a real disciplined skill. So at the end of the day, what this chapter teaches us is that a really strong argument comes down to two things that you just can't separate. One, you have to present the problem with absolute clarity. If you don't, your reader is lost before you even start. And two, you have to back up your position with solid proofs. Without them, your argument just has no teeth. You need both. It's a 1-2 punch. So, if the introduction to an essay is what opens the door, this second chapter is what builds the entire frame of the house. It's where your gut feelings become a real argument, where you learn to explain, to prove, and to organize your thoughts with strength and precision. So as you think about your own writing, the real question is, which of these proofs are you going to use to make your next argument even stronger?